The scripture reading today comes from John 8, 3 to 11th. And then the other reading is going to be a letter from the Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King. The religious scholars and Pharisees led in a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They stood her in plain sight of everyone and said, "Teacher, this woman was caught red-handed in the act of adultery. Moses in the law gives orders to stone such persons. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something incriminating so they could bring charges against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger in the dirt. They kept at him, badgering him. He straightened up and he said, "The sinless one among you, go first. Throw the stone." Bending down again, he wrote some more in the dirt. Hearing that, they walked away, one after another, beginning with the oldest. The woman was left alone. Jesus stood up and spoke to her. "Woman, where are they? Does no one condemn you?" "No one, Master." "Neither do I," said Jesus. "Go on your way from now on. Do not sin." One more. Yes, we have the other reading. This is from Martin Luther King, the letter from Birmingham jail. "We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of men and women willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation." Again, that was the letter from the Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King. And now we'll hear from Dr. Floyd. Dr. Floyd, Pastor Floyd, yes.
We've been doing for the last month in Bible study texts that are not in the lectionary. That is, the lectionary is something that people preach from every Sunday throughout the world. And the Protestant, there's one called the Common Lectionary, and there's one called the Catholic Lectionary. In neither lectionary does this text occur. And it surprised me because I know this text. Most of you have heard this text because in Sunday school we've taught it. The thing is, we just don't preach about it. And this is the John 8 text. It only occurs in John. And it occurs because it's a text that made itself into the Bible. In other words, we know that at least when Matthew was written, when Mark was written, when Luke was there written, people were telling the story, but nobody wrote it down. But this story they kept on telling until when John gets there, he has to write it down. Because it's that powerful of a story and it's that pronounced of a reality. And though when you see all the testosterone-driven interpretations of this text, you'll see it as, they will name it many times. I call it the text of the invisible man. Now, when you hear the text, you'll see why. It says that there was a woman found in adultery. Now, how do you commit adultery by yourself? I mean, how do you find a way to commit adultery? Now you see why I called it the text of the invisible man. And so they go ahead, and by the way, remember, they don't want us to preach this text, right? A part of why they don't want to preach that text is you have to deal with the hypocrisy of the reality. There's this woman, and she is doing nothing that a whole lot of other men aren't doing or accused of doing. And the implications of this text is that either she is just an innocent doing whatever she does, or there is, unfortunately, a forced encounter upon her. Either way, she is then left, and the men take her, and they drag her out. Isn't it funny how people will take a victim, and they will make the victim like it's a one that is guilty? Isn't it funny that the victim and the things that she does or the things that you're accused of, suddenly it becomes your fault when you had nothing to do with it. In fact, it was done to you. In fact, isn't it funny that folk will look at homeless people and say they ought not be homeless as if somehow not having money is in their reality? Isn't it funny how people will get mad and say, we don't want marriage equality because it'll mess with my marriage? Isn't that funny? How we take a victim and we make the victim the problem. Isn't it funny that anytime somebody talks about race in America, as long as we're being racist, it's not a problem. When someone then talks about race in America, oh, you're being racist. Isn't it funny how we take something and somebody who is actually a victim and we decided that the victim is the problem? And so if she has been violated or she's just being used, she becomes then, they take her and they drag her. And here's the part I don't understand. Not only does it become a text, even though I called it the text of invisible men, this text is all about men. Because in point of fact, not only did whoever it was that was with her decide to let that happen. That's, okay, y'all don't know what I'm saying, right? You can't do it alone, and actually he had to be there, and then he saw it happening and went, okay. He said, okay. And all these men come, and they drag her by all these other men, and they take her to the temple, and they take her to a place that is a temple where only men are. And now this woman, who is the person who all she did what all everybody else does, they move her into a all male's place. And they're going to judge her. Isn't it funny how people say that it doesn't matter representation? Isn't it funny that people say, everybody in the room was okay? How do I make this plain? It is a strange thing to me that folks will think that it doesn't matter who's in the room because everybody in the room has good intention. But every woman in here just told, I know y'all felt it in your belly. When you heard that she was drugged into a room full of all men, every woman in here went, oh, that ain't a good thing. And the reason you thought it's not going to be a good thing is because you realize there's nobody like her there. There's nobody there, and we don't even care. It doesn't even matter if all good men are there. The problem is there's nobody like her there. And the chances are good men fall into a problem when it's only men. See, the problem is that you can have great intention, but then we are tribalistic people. So good intentions is not enough because somebody, oh, y'all looking at me like you don't know what I'm talking about. Let me break it down this way. You know, for years, when there were only men in medical research teams, they thought that they could do all the research on men and it would just apply to women. It never occurred to them that maybe women were different. But I want to tell you, if one woman was around that table, she would have said, excuse me. It makes a difference. And the problem is that sometimes we who stand in society, we think that we can get rid of and do things by simply having good people who are in place. They're all good people. Good people can do bad things. We're in the atmosphere of bad people. It doesn't matter. I'm tired of folks saying, and this is why this text is important, I'm tired of folks saying, oh, but I didn't intend it to be that way. Have you ever been to a place where you look back later and you saw the consequences was bad, and you're like, how did they get bad? How did we get so far off track? How do we make that decision? How did we mess up so badly? We didn't intend it to be that way. But I'll tell you right now, if the wrong people are in the room, you'll get the wrong decisions. So all these men, is that my mic scraping? Am I doing anything? Oh, they're gone. So that's okay. I'll just keep going. So I don't know what is happening. But that the entirety of, because there's men in this room, and only men in this room, nobody looks and says, excuse me, yeah, I contend if there was one woman in that room, she would have said, whoa, hey, excuse me, where's the brother? All it would have taken is one woman. None of the men, this entire text and the story that's told, this entire text, none of the men question, where's the man? And now, some of the men looking, and I want all the men, because y'all are all feminists here. I know all the non-feminist men are not in church this Sunday. I understand that. But all the men are sitting there. I would have said something. No, you would not. Because that's just the way simply things were done. There's a danger when the way that simply things were done was wrong. And until somebody stands up against it, it'll still be done that way. Isn't it funny that for years segregation was not a problem because that's just the way things were done? Isn't it funny that when women asked to vote, which now is kind of funny, women can't vote because that's just simply the way things were done. You understand that until there's somebody who's affected by the pain and affected by the loss of a right that's in the room, that's just the way things are done. Well, now policy in America and policy in the world are done with people with a lot of money. And it never occurs to them while they're doing something how it's hurting somebody. That's just the way things are done. And so they're sitting there in the room with all men and no woman to say, excuse me, where the brother at? It didn't even occur to them to ask where the brother at. Okay, for those of you, I do know English, but you know. But you know y'all would have said it that way because y'all would have been mad. I mean, the men are all going with it. You sisters would have been too mad, right? Dragging her all up in here, right? And all that. That may be a funny point, but you see, to understand something right now, this is a problem. People are wondering, why is it that we have to have a part of the movement? Because you see, until you get mad, no things change. And you know, when your rights are not on the line, you don't get mad. When it's just something you know intellectually, you don't get mad. When you can drive the street and nobody stops you for driving black, you don't get mad. When somebody will not bother you just because you hold your partner's hand, you don't get mad. But I guarantee you, if you are that person, you get mad. And it's the passion that's missing in the room. It's the passion that's missing in America right now. It's the passion that's missing. We're just going along. Well, it'll be taken care of one day, I guarantee you. If you're a Latino, one day can't come back fast enough. I guarantee you that woman that's sitting there looking at all the men, literally with no voice whatsoever, but if there was a sister in the room, she would have been mad. But it gets worse. Because the 8th chapter makes it very clear it wasn't even about her. Isn't it funny how people will use the body of a victim for political reasons? Isn't it funny how people will look at something and somebody, and because they have no power, they will define who they are in a way to make them look good rather than do the reality. This is, in fact, what is happening in this woman. They've drug her in there. They didn't even accept her humanity. They were just using her to get at Jesus. And I want to let you understand something. I just told you it was a process that they were determining good, guilt, and evil. No. The system not only was all men, but it was rigged. Everybody, it was a rigged system. It was, the sister's like, it was rigged just by her being, I got it, but it was really rigged, okay? I know some of y'all were like, I know it was rigged because there ain't no men there. But it could have been, they at least could have tried. They weren't trying. It was a rigged system. And they didn't care about her. How can I make this plain? Here's one of the more realities when it seems cruel to the person to whom it's being done, but the folks who are doing it don't get the cruelty of it. This is a cruel text. This is a text of terror. This is a whole bunch of dudes who are doing something to this sister, and they don't even understand how bad it is. I'm suggesting at this moment in history, I believe people when they say, I don't see why y'all upset. I don't see what the issue is. Oh, they talking back to me this Sunday. Ignorance. That's what, I ain't say that, guys, okay? But whatever it is, they don't even feel ignorance. They're just doing what they're doing. That's why sometimes the problem is not the intellectual argument. The problem is the emotional inability to have empathy. I can't even imagine how you feel because I'm not trying. And then I look at you and say, why are you questioning it? That's just the way things are. So they're using her. They put her in front of Jesus. And they say, hey, Jesus, now according to the law, folks start talking to you about the law when they're already wrong, then what they mean is they can manipulate the law. What they mean is they are the law. What they mean is that they will define the law. Oh, how can I make this plain? You see, truth is one thing. Fact is the reality. Truth and fact are different. The facts are the objective thing that happened. The truth is what we decide happened. Y'all missed that, didn't you? In the events of the last few days, if you looked at Fox TV, you thought one thing happened. You looked at something else, you thought another thing happened. The facts were the same. Somebody got shot. The facts were the same. That we didn't know at the time who got shot at. Now, there were some of us who looked and said, it's a terrible thing, and I'm so sorry someone got shot. But there's another way to look at it and go, somebody got shot, and we know who it was. And that became a truth. And then people, if you say the truth long enough, it becomes facts. And even when they found the shooter and it wasn't who it is, it's very hard to let it go because now it's truth. Now truth and facts have been merged together as a narrative. And when truth and fact becomes merged together, it's hard. I'm going to say this. I know this is uneducated. It's hard to make somebody unignorant. It just is hard. Once they get to on that, once they cross that ignorance thing, oh Lord, this is hard, right? Because you know why? It doesn't even make sense. So y'all looking at me like I don't know what I'm talking about. Let me show you what I mean. The next day, when they decide truth and fact were the same, and that somehow in Utah, I think there are about 4 black people. I don't know how many black people in Utah. I know one thing, I can't get off the plane without people knowing who I am. And everybody can track me wherever I go. I know that. But they began to believe that perhaps this was somebody who black and the black folk was against them, and he not only shot them and got away. Now you're like, they didn't say black people, but you know what colleges they threatened? were black apologists. Now, there ain't no rationality in that reality. The problem was ignorance and became fact, and it makes no sense. So what do you do? So Jesus looks at them because they are in their most ignorant point of view. By the way, they were absolutely wrong. That was not the law. I need to let you know. There was a law that if you were found in adultery, by the way, nobody enforced the law, by the way. I'm telling you right now, if they did, they'd be in court all day. Nobody really enforced the law. But when they did enforce the law, it was the man and the woman who came together before the court. So they were wrong about the law itself. But these folk together have decided this was the law. The fact and the truth have been merged to ignorance, and this poor woman sitting here going, I'm just sitting here with no voice. And Jesus then does not talk to her. Thank God Jesus didn't talk to her. Because one of the more dangerous, and I want everybody, and especially these young folks who lean into it, I want you to understand, it's not your fault. When other people hate you, there's nothing you did. I want you to understand, when other people look at you and say you're different and they have a problem, you don't have to make yourself any different. God made you. God already looked at you and said, you okay. You don't have a problem, they have a problem. You are not the problem. They are the problem. Not the way you love, not the way you look, not the way you walk, none of that. That's not the problem. They're just trying to make it a problem. But I will tell you right now, just keep standing and say, I'm not the problem. Just keep standing. When bullies try to come at you and try to tell you that that if you were a little different, if you did, no, you the sick person. I'm the well one. You the crazy person. I got sense. I'm going to, because God, don't let anybody ever accuse you of being wrong just for being you. And Jesus isn't accusing you either. He does not look at the woman. He looks at them. And now, you got to understand something. As you know, I have a very animated understanding of the scripture. And I know that there are Europeans who will look at this text, and they will not care what expression Jesus must have had on his face. But us black folk, you know, he looked at him like, say what? You know he did. Oh, you mean y'all think that I don't know what you doing? Oh, you got the wrong one today. You want to? I know that theologically, but for folk, we who are melanated understanding of the text, we want to know how Jesus stood, whatever. And you know what I love he did? He looked at him and he stooped down. Now, I want you to understand what stooping is, because I didn't understand this until I looked at the text. This part made me laugh. Y'all may not get it, but because if he squatted, he was looking at them. Now get this, Jesus is right there. If he squatted, he was looking at them. But you know what the action of stooping is? He turned his backside. Please. You ever, please. Y'all ain't even, please. Come on now. Yo, I ain't even going to engage in your stupidity. Please. You are not going to get me to question this woman, please. And you notice how people always try to get you to question the victim? If she was raped, there must have been some way that she was looking. If there was a racial incident, it must have been how they acted. You understand? They're always trying to get you to question the victim. And I hate to say it, church people are the worst people. We are involved in the judgment of people. But let me tell you something. Right now, wrong is wrong. I don't care what, it was wrong. And every once in a while, until the church decides to stop falling into the guilt and blaming situation, we will never be on the side of the right side of history. If we try to tell people that they ought to act this way and do this thing, and it has nothing to do with the Bible, then y'all turn your backside and say, please. I don't care. Please. But the Bible says that. No, it don't. Please. But you understand, now the other thing I have to tell you this, and this is going to be controversial. You realize I probably aired one of them men. A few of them probably had committed adultery themselves. I'm just saying. A few of them might have been guilty themselves. I'm just saying that. Please. As if somehow your sins are not there. Please. As if you wouldn't have tried to cuss somebody out if they did that to you. I know y'all saved, sanctified, and y'all don't cuss folk. But, it's like but they said something. Of course they said something. When you treat me that way, I'm going to say something. But it's still wrong for you to do what you did. At some point, this text becomes the text that we're living through today. Jesus then turns his backside, and he looks as he turns his backside, and this is the part that got me. All the rest didn't get me. This got me. He said, if none of y'all have committed sins, go ahead and cast the stone. That's why I like Jesus, We preach it as if somehow Jesus is a non-emotional person. But that response tells me right now he was in a mood. Really. You brought her up to me, trying to get me. Okay, fine. Okay. Okay, if none of y'all ain't ever done this, whoever it is, go ahead and pick up the stone. Because the ones who don't, we know who you are. Here's what's really interesting. It's not because of what God did. It's not even because of what Jesus did. But you know what saved her? Because one of those men got it. And he walked away. And then another. And then another. I am not saying we shouldn't be praying in this moment, but I'll tell you, the salvation of this moment is not based on what God does. It's based on what the men in the room and the women in the room do and the allies in the room do. That's why I had you read the letter from Birmingham jail. Y'all know the context of that letter? King was in jail. And a bunch of ministers, okay, they were white. I was trying to, but a bunch of white ministers got together. And they told him, you stirring up a lot of problems. Now, by the way, he was in jail, and it was illegal that he was in jail. He was in jail, and he was exercising his right, but they still threw him in jail. And these ministers didn't write to the police. They didn't write to the mayor. They didn't write to the governor. They didn't write to the president. They wrote to him and told him, boy, you need to shut up a little bit. Stop making waves. Stop standing up. Sister, just, you kind of wrong. You were in adultery, just let it go. And that letter is where we are today. He wrote back a letter to them folks, kind of in the same mood that Jesus was. So you know what? This ain't about anybody but you. If you sit in a room and you allow this to happen and you have power and don't say anything, then whatever happens is on you. If you religious people, Tell somebody they just have to sit up and shut up, or you don't want to march, or you don't want to stand up for justice, or you don't want to do that. Guess what? It's on you. If this woman gets stoned today, it's not about her. It's not about the law. It's about you. If churches in America, and in this church, we're going to do it right now. I know. It's the end of the series. I ain't going to see you next Sunday, so I'm going to go ahead and say this, and y'all going to be mad at me for 2 weeks. All right. But this moment is a moment that's about us. What are we doing? I've been in rooms where I've been the only black person in the room, and something stupid is about to happen, and that's the only way to say it. It's something stupid going to happen. And it's hard for me to say something because I'm like, oh, dang, I can't believe I got to stand up there, and everybody going to see me differently, and y'all don't know we go through this. And everybody they're going to see me differently, and then every time they see me, they're going to be, there he is. I don't want to do any of that stuff. But if you say you love Jesus, you got to stand. There'll be times when you're the only woman in the room. And yes, that still happens. I know it's a shocker. Or the senior woman in the room, and they're about to do something stupid, because men can still do stupid stuff. I know that's a surprise to you too. Especially men in power. They don't mean nothing by it, and they're all good, well-meaning men. See, I can stop racists. I can stop people that mean something bad. I can't really, it's hard for me to stop. It's like, I know Jim. I know he don't really mean this, but he's about to do something stupid. And I don't want to say nothing. But you understand what God is saying to you is your voice is stronger and bigger than you know. That one man who is not identified in this text. And read it in any translation, it says, and one person dropped the rock and walked away, which gave permission for the rest of them to drop their rocks and walk away. It is not then the problem of Facebook, or the problem of Instagram, or the problem of TikTok. I don't know the other stuff, but it's not that problem. It's the problem of relationships. It's the folk who you know that you letting get away with stuff in your life. That love you. I'm not talking about folks you halfway know. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Somebody you know. And that is when it takes courage. It is not a courageous thing to stand up against somebody you don't know. It's a courageous thing when you're putting your relationship on the line and say, look here now. I know you're better than that. And even after the day, you may never, ever, you're going to look at me differently. Because you probably looked at me wrongly to begin with. But right now, I've got to tell you right now, I'm a follower of Jesus. And Jesus stooped and said, not mine, yours. Not my movement, your movement. Not my moment, your moment. And the woman then stands up and everybody leaves, and then Jesus turns around to her. Now here is because men could not leave this alone. Y'all look at me like what that means. If you look in your Bibles, the next phrase will have a bracket around it. Because that's the way the story ended, with Jesus looking at the woman. They couldn't, but the brother's like, oh, no. So translators, about 100 years later, added this. Jesus looked at the woman and said, sin, go away and sin no more. Jesus ain't said that. And even the translators that put it in the Bible, it's in bracketed to say, look, he may not have said that. No, we know he didn't say that. But the brothers just couldn't leave it alone. They couldn't let it be known that she had there's literally no guilt. She couldn't do nothing. And whatever she did wasn't enough. But they decided to throw that in at the end. Now you're like, why do I preach that? Because let me tell you something. I would love to say, everybody in this church, that if you stand up and you do the right thing, people are going to celebrate you. I'm sorry. That ain't going to happen. A few people? Well, there's some people that have to feel big by trying to make you feel small. There's some people that just can't admit. I'm about to make a joke, but I won't make it. This is from my wife. There's an apology, and then there's a justifying apology. Every woman in here knows what that is, right? Okay. I'm like, well, you know, I was wrong, but really, if you had done this, you're like, no, stop it. I was wrong. Stop right there. That's hard for us brothers, okay? All right. Like, can I protect me a little bit? No. Okay. And people would love to do that to you, to make you feel bad. But do not accept this. You are not the reason things are messing up. Barack Obama's presidency is not why the country's messed up. He ain't been president for a while. Women voting is not the reason we got a problem. LGBTQIA, queer community is not the reason we got it. Trans folk are not the reason. If they would just be nicer, we'd be okay. That's a lie. The reality is, in this text, she could do nothing, and she did the right thing, which is stand in her power. Because this isn't about her. It's about them. And if you're in the crowd and not the victim, or they consider you, and you understand, and I'm going to do this last thing. I'm really trying to get out of this word, but this is a really important word. It's the last one. So excuse me if I'm going to go 5 minutes later, because I got to tell you this. This is my Clarence Thomas part of this sermon. If you're the only one, you really have to speak up. God didn't make you the only one to be silent. I have two mentors in the room. Both of them served at the Bush administration. You could probably figure out, because there was only two people in the cabinet at that point, but I'm not going to mention their names. And I was sitting around talking with them because one of them, I was her whatever, what do we call that? I was one of her assistants. She said to this other person, I have one portfolio. I'm on the cabinet to do one thing. And whenever that comes up, I will speak about that one thing. But I won't speak about anything else because I know about that one thing. The brother who was there said, no, I'm in the room. I'm the only black person at the table. I got millions of people who should have been here, and I'm the one here. I figure I'm the expert on black everything. So whatever comes up, I don't care. I got something to say. Because that's why I'm there. If you're the only one in the room of your profile, your job is not to be invisible. Your job is not to go along. Amen. Your job is to be the one that drops the rock. Because if they let you in the room, they value you. And the one they're hurting, they don't value. They can scream. Anyone they don't value can scream. But anyone they value can whisper and make a difference. Speak up. It's about you. Will the musicians get back to the choir? I hope this word has been helpful in this moment. And now you see why they don't want this in the lectionary. Because it's a hard word. And it isn't a word about God, it's a word about, and the other reality is, by the way, when they do teach it in seminary, you know what they teach it about? The challenge to Jesus. I kid you not. I mean, Gordon, that's what they do. They talk about that they're challenging Jesus. That wasn't even a Jesus, like, Jesus didn't even deal with the challenge. I mean, it'd be interesting if Jesus dealt with the challenge, but you know what Jesus said is, oh, please. And in a mood, he said, nah, this ain't about me. You tried to get me, but it's actually about you. And so that's why this text is important. So go home, read it, think about it. Where am I in the text? And when do I stand up? And when do I drop the rock? Martin King's words are still there. We will not have to confess in this moment about what we did. We have to confess about what we didn't.